Good to be with you again. I hope you won't mind me sharing some personal memories with you today. Yesterday, May the 27th, was the 59th anniversary of my ordination as a priest, and today, the 59th anniversary of the first time I celebrated the Holy Mass. And as I think back, obviously a lot of memories come back to me, not only of those first days, but all through the years in my ministry. Bishop Michael Heil had become Bishop of Wilmington in March of 1961, but had a couple of heart attacks, so he was confined in St. Francis Hospital. And my classmate in the seminary in Washington, Jim Delaney, often called Monsignor Taggart asking, well, who's going to ordain us? Whose name do we put on the invitations we're going to send out? And all we heard was, you're going to be ordained on May 27. We don't know who will do it. Later on, we found that they had called and gotten an auxiliary bishop of Philadelphia to agree to do the ordination, but then he died. Then they got an auxiliary bishop of Baltimore to agree to do it, and he was involved in an auto accident. And then they got an auxiliary bishop in Washington to agree to do it, and he became gravely ill. So the word must have been spreading through the American hierarchy. I think God is trying to say something to us. If you get a call from Wilmington to ordain 4 of their deacons to the priesthood, don't say yes or something awful is going to happen. But poor Bishop Schlotterbach of the Oblates of St. Francis de Sales had a diocese in Southwest Africa, and he was back in the States for vacation and to raise funds for the missions. So he was the bishop who ordained us in St. Peter's Cathedral. And when Jim Delaney and I came from the seminary to Wilmington on the 26th, we reported to Monsignor Taggart, and as always, he had some work for us to do, cleaning out and moving books and bookcases for Father Julian. So in the process, I somehow sprained my back. And of course, no one had made any plans for us for dinner. And the seminary was just there. So Jim invited me to join him and his family up in Westchester at their home. Well, they really weren't expecting us, so we had a light supper. And I guess as we went back to the cathedral for the rehearsal that night, the priest could hear my stomach growling for food. So they said, as soon as the rehearsal's over, we'll take you to St. Mary's Church on the east side. That's where another one of the seminarians and I were to stay for the night. And we'll go right to the refrigerator. Well, when we opened the door, there was one large watermelon and some 7-Up. That was it. So I went to bed that night very hungry and with my back killing me. And then some folks were paid their salaries that night, so they rejoiced at a tavern down the street from the rectory. And so at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., they serenaded me all through the night. In the morning, Father Clarahan saw me and said, oh, come with me to the convent. I'm going to celebrate a Mass for the Franciscan nuns who taught in school there. And this will be your last Mass before you're ordained. Well, it was an Ember Saturday we were being ordained. And that meant there were 6 readings from the Old Testament with their responsories and the Epistle and Gospel. It was a long Mass, and my back was killing me. Thank God everything went well with the ordination itself. I was able to get down on the floor in the prostration at the beginning and be able to get up again. Afterward, of course, it's the custom for the newly ordained to give their blessing to their families and friends. And since my contingent, I suppose, was the smallest, they had come down from New York. So I was the first one in the sacristy to take off the vestments. And Monsignor Taggart came in and saw me and looked at the vesting table, which was clear of everything except 4 white envelopes. And he said, "Don't you want to know where you're being assigned?" "Oh, that's it?" And as I opened that letter, I can still remember him looking over my shoulder very intently to see if the bishop had listened to his recommendation. And apparently he did. I was being assigned to St. Edmunds in Rehoboth Beach. Many of the newly ordained used to be assigned to the beach parishes for their first year, a little slower way to break into the priestly ministry. And as I went down to my first assignment, I realized there was murder kill, broad kill, slaughter beach. I thought, my goodness, these people are certainly fixed on killing. Of course, right after the ordination, we were taken over to St. Francis Hospital to give our blessing to Bishop Heil and also Archbishop Fitzmaurice, who had been in Ireland on a vacation and had to have one leg amputated. So he was also in St. Francis, and we gave them our blessings. I clearly remember at the first Mass in St. Kevin's Parish, my home parish in Flushing, New York, and I had chosen for the Mass some of the priests who have been instrumental in my life. Father Joe Keyes, who is my great example, I guess, of priesthood, who gave the sermon, and Father John Rudden, who had been in charge of us altar boys, and then a priest from St. John's University, Father Cook, Father Wilson, the local parish priest. At St. Edmunds, the first Mass I had, 11 o'clock Mass, was jam-packed, of course, and people were standing not only in the side aisles, the center aisle, the back, but even in front of all the pews. And someone had forgotten to tell the new pastor, Father McDonough, had arrived in February. They forgot to tell him that lightning had hit the air conditioning. So we had no air conditioning, no electricity. And I was trying to project my voice over those standing right in front of me to reach those other folks out there in the congregation. That evening, they have a little celebration for Father McDonough because he was celebrating his 25th anniversary of ordination. And it was held at the Star of the Sea Motel, which used to be a place for Franciscan nuns at the beach, now a motel. And at the beginning, Harry Wright, who was the owner, came around with a tray of cocktails, and Father DeMichael, your old-fashioned, and Father Flowers, your whiskey sour, and gin and tonic for the street, and Father Russell, your lemonade. For Bishop Heil had surprised us when he saw us in the hospital, when he asked us to abstain from all alcohol for 5 years. Many of our classmates in other dioceses knew that was a requirement, but that was a surprise for us. 5 years of lemonade. I was actually at Rehoboth only 9 months because in February, when I went back to the seminary reunion, came back, Father McDonough said, "While you were away, the bishop called and asked if I could get along without you for a few weeks." And I said, "Well, what did you say?" And he said, "Father, when the bishop asks something, there's only one response: yes, Bishop." So on Monday, I left Rehoboth, and that Wednesday was Ash Wednesday in '62. That was the day of the great nor'easter storm that hit Rehoboth especially hard. I always said Rehoboth lost me the beach and the boardwalk all in 1 week. So the 3 weeks turned out to be 3 months, all of Lent, all of Holy Week, Easter time. And one day, Father Hamill came in as he was the administrator, and he said, well, you're going back to Rehoboth tomorrow. Father McDonough has collapsed of low blood pressure, so you have to celebrate all the masses, any baptisms, weddings, whatever, and report to the bishop Monday morning on his condition. And then in another week or so, I received the change of assignment to St. Anne's for 5.5 years in Wilmington. Of course, that was June of '62. And in October, the Second Vatican Council opened. For a number of years, there have been movements circulating in the church calling for a revival of our sacred liturgy and our whole life as a church. So I was very happy to be involved in that effort to translate the decisions and the spirit of the Second Vatican Council into practice in our diocese and in the parishes. I particularly became aware of the need for renewal in the sacred liturgy and worked for that. It was not easy to convert silent Catholic congregations to speaking aloud the prayers of the Mass, to singing, doing all the other things that we have done in the renewal of the sacred liturgy. And I guess that's why it's particularly difficult for me in these days to see so much of the work that we did throughout our life going down the drain. It's very painful for me to experience these changes that we have to make in the name of safety from the virus. We can only pray that God will restore us to be able to praise Him as we ought. I was also involved in the effort to renew the diocese. I became one of the 4 priests elected by the younger priests after a series of discussions to meet with representatives of the other 3 age groups with the bishop. We met in the basement of Christ our King beginning November 30th, right into January. 8 meetings of 5 hours each, as we hammered out how we would implement the spirit and decrees of the Second Vatican Council. When the first Council of Priests was selected, Bishop Heil appointed me as one of his 5 appointees to the Council. And within the Council, I was chosen to serve on the first Priest Personnel Committee. For 5 years, I served as its secretary. And at one point, we were asked to send delegates to a meeting in Chicago because all the dioceses of the country were doing these things. And there was a need to coordinate, work together, see if we could help one another. So I was selected as one of the 3 to go to Chicago. And within the group, they decided to have each province, and in our case it's the Baltimore province of 5 dioceses, would select one person, and I was the one selected to represent it, and became one of the 27 founders then of the National Federation of Priest Councils. And the temporary head, Pat O'Malley of Chicago, asked me to serve as the first chairman of the Personnel Committee of the National Federation. So it was a time of great enthusiasm, renewal, great struggles. And yes, at one point, I was at Immaculate Heart of Mary as an associate, and Bishop Mardiga called me because the Supreme Court had issued its decree allowing abortions, and he appointed me to be the head of the Family Life Bureau. So with his support, we gathered a number of people to establish Birthright of Delaware, and another group of people to establish Delaware Right to Life. And then we helped to organize our participation in the first of the annual March on Washington in January. Of course, after 10 years as an associate, I then became a pastor at Holy Rosary for 11 years, pastor at Our Lady of Fatima in Newcastle for 12, and now 26 years here at St. Helena's. And I find myself, above all, giving thanks to God for calling me to a wonderful life as a Catholic priest. Never in my wildest dreams, I guess, could I have thought it could be such a happy, fulfilling life. I wanted to do something significant with my life, and the priesthood was it. And as I reflect on all the joys and the triumphs and the sorrows of these 59 years, I think particularly of all the wonderful people it has been my privilege to work with, to serve, to love and care for as a priest. So many of you who have been so supportive of our church and our ministry. I thank you, I pray for you, and I hope that you will pray that many more will respond to the Lord's call to serve him and his people as priests of the church. I do have a number of photos here in my albums, if some of you would like to look at them. But I do want to remind you that next week is a very important week. We will be showing you exactly how our church is set up for our celebration of the Eucharist on Sundays and weekdays, beginning June 1, and how we will make every effort to keep things safe for you as you come to join together in our celebration. So next week, we will be showing that to you at this time. Thank you again.